priorities of this country, it can yield more results than you would expect. And that is what we have done, to deploy the capital to the key areas of infrastructure, both human and physical, and also to the security of the country. The overall story is that yes, we can have fiscal consolidation and a prudent budget, but we can also unleash growth by targeting the resources we have to unlock those areas that have not yet that are proven to be constraints in the economy. So in tandem with this, the budget is underpinned by the following parameters: oil production of 2.388 million barrels per day compared to 2.56 million barrels per day in 2013, benchmark oil price of $77.5 per barrel, projected real GDP growth of 6.75%, and an average exchange rate of 160 naira to the dollar. Based on these assumptions, the 2014 budget envisages a net federally collectible revenue of 7.5 trillion. Of this, 3.73 trillion is projected to fund the federal government's budget, representing about a 9% reduction from the 4.1 trillion for 2013. A total expenditure of 4.642 trillion, representing a decline of about 7% from the 2013 budget of 4.98 trillion, is proposed for the 2014 budget. This is made up of various categories: 399 billion for statutory transfers, 712 billion for debt service, 2.41 trillion for recurrent non-debt expenditure, and 1.245 trillion for capital expenditure. Key allocations we will hand to you, but we want to mention some. Federal Ministry of Education, including UBEC and TED Fund, 655 billion, Defense, 340 billion, Police Affairs and Police Command and Police Service Commission, 301 billion, Health, 262 billion, Works, 128 billion, Power, 102 billion, Agriculture, 66 billion, and there are other allocations which we can also share with you. These amounts also leverage additional resources from the donor community, which add to our ability to implement the budget. The sum of 268.3 billion made up of federal government share of savings from the partial removal of subsidy on fuel of 180 billion, augmented by the 2013 projected unspent balances, is proposed for the 2014 SURE-P budget. This amount will be used to make further progress in the provision of social safety net schemes and to boost the development of critical infrastructure projects. So we also need to remember that in the SURE-P, we are also boosting the capital expenditure and the expenditure on social safety nets with an additional 268.3 billion naira. The federal government's aggregate spending in 2014 is estimated to rise to 4.91 trillion, of which a total of 1.53 trillion is for capital expenditure, when the 268 billion provision for the SURE-P program is added. Coming on the back of the downward projection of the revenue estimates for 2014, the fiscal deficit is projected to rise marginally to about 1.9% of GDP in the 2014 budget compared to 1.85% in 2013, which is still keeping a very tight and prudent budget and in consonance with the fiscal responsibility law, which enjoins us to keep the budget deficit below 3% of GDP. Now, the priority areas of the budget. It will continue to place emphasis on critical sectors of the economy, such as the ones that I've already described for 2013. So education, health, roads, rail power, and aviation continue to be given priority. That is, our infrastructure is of paramount importance to us and to Nigerians. And to supplement government's effort, the private sector will be brought in through public-private partnerships. We have to work hard on this because we acknowledge that government funding alone will not be able to deliver all the benefits and services in infrastructure that we need for this country. We are also exploring, of course, and managing to get through approval from the National Assembly of concessional credits from our partners, which will enable us to implement some of these areas in infrastructure, education, and health. On housing and construction, this is a primary and key area of focus that we have now launched in 2014. as a center of government for policy and of the transformation agenda. This was launched by Mr. President just on Thursday last week. The administration is fully aware that investing in the housing sector in Nigeria will address several issues. One is the social need for families to have a roof over their heads. We need to address it. We need to begin that journey to multiply the availability of housing, both on the mass housing end for the lower income people in our population, as well as the lower and middle income. And that is what we launched on Thursday. Mr. President launched this. We know that there's no family that lives without having a roof over its head, wanting a roof over its head. And this is a very critical factor that we have, to date, not paid as much attention to. This administration has launched an effort. We know that a booming housing industry will also create jobs. From various studies, we know that every new home can create at least 5.62 direct jobs and 2.48 indirect jobs through housing-related expenditures. So this is a sector that should give us that handle on improving job creation within the economy, and to give our young people hope. Young people in this country need to know that they will grow up in future in a country where they'll be able to access housing, be able to access a mortgage, to be able to have a roof over their heads, or participate in a rent-to-own or lease-to-own scheme where at the end of 20 years they'll be able to pay off and have a home of their own. So this is a cardinal policy of 2014 for this administration. And I'm happy to say that the Nigerian Mortgage Refinance Corporation, which was launched, the guarantee scheme to allow access for lower-income people, the effort at mass housing launched with the Ministry of Housing and Lands Housing, all these are kicking in this year. Let me also comment here and illustrate what we said earlier, that when you look at the capital budget of the Ministry of Housing, you will see a budgeted amount of 12.9 billion. And when somebody looks at this, they say, what is it? Are they saying that they are going to create jobs with just this amount? But that's missing the point. I'm illustrating what I said before, that through government supportive policies for this sector, we are going to catalyze 8 times more in the beginning than this budget you see here for housing, by supporting the private sector to be the deliverer and creator of jobs. The Nigerian Mortgage Refinance Institution will have $250 million that it can work with, perhaps about 50 billion. It will float bonds for another 50 billion. That's already 100 billion in capitalization almost. Compare that to the 12.9 billion which we see in the budget. So when we look at these numbers, let's not get fixated that this is the only thing. No, these are catalysts to bigger government policies that liberate more resources and create jobs. And that is why this budget is a budget for growth and for job creation and inclusive growth. In agriculture, we'll continue to focus on this sectoral initiative. As I mentioned before, we plan to attract 750,000 young Nigerians to be agripreneurs. We are establishing this FAFIN fund of $100 million, starting from 25 to 100 million. We will focus on SMEs, small and medium enterprises, and boost manufacturing in these SMEs by implementing the Nigeria Enterprise Development Program, NEDEP, to help SMEs with business development support, provision of access to finance, and training. This will support, again, our young people who are involved in the SME sector. We are planning in 2014, as part of government policy, the establishment of a wholesale development finance institution. What do we mean by this? If you look at our economy, you find that business people do not have access to medium to long-term money. They are borrowing short-term, 12 months, 3 months, 12 months, 3 months sometimes, 3 years, to invest in enterprises that require 5, 7, and 10 years. How can you then make progress in this economy? How can we sustain it if people cannot find long-term finance? A cardinal policy of this government is the establishment of this wholesale development finance institution to bring in medium to long-term tenor money, 10 to 15-year money into this economy. Just as we now launch the mortgage refinance institution, we expect